I've been stuck in this hole for way too long. I've got 99 problems that are going on. I woke up a mess of red and black, stiffed my suit and threw it back. The weak pushed over insecurity, so much for camaraderie. This whole damn place is a house of cards, only one nudge from tumbling down. But I gotta be strong, if only for mom. We got 99 things that are going wrong. 99 problems, and the list goes on.
Hi there everyone, this is Madhog the Wastelander, in voice form only this time around. Mostly because I don't really have all that much to say about the latest chapter in Project Horizons. It's repetitious, I want to say? Yes, well, basically it feels like a reprisal of chapter 72 for the most part, with Blackjack being stuck in a rocket. This time, instead of going from Earth, from Equus to the moon, it's vice versa. She's again stuck in there, so she has nothing better to do than to pry another pony's life through her former empty shell of a body, which is still linked with the psychic waves that were the superpowers she got from children. Oh, anyway, It's still a bit confusing to process, but anyway, she's able to see what's going on Equus, how the big bad war is panning out, and it's also the only way for us readers to actually see what's going on there, because Somber pretty much wrote himself into a corner by adopting this very specific style of writing. This first-person, first-pony point of view that stays a first pony point of view instead of just breaking out of the facade of its gimmick, so to speak, to just go all out third person omniscient point of view, which would have helped, but instead we have to use the Perceptitron gimmick to see what's going on other fronts of this story. And again, I once again have to reprise my own problems that I have, my own personal problems, mind you, that I have with this particular aspect, in that not being able to recall most of the characters, or I should say not being able to care anymore about these characters, I find myself quite bored through most of the reading, which is basically the entirety of the first part of this chapter, because it's divided in two parts, because it was particularly long. And it feels to me that I understand, like I said, I understand the importance of seeing individual characters, what they're doing, how they are contributing to the story and to the big war, and how they're going to end up, and a lot of people is going to die. A lot of, well, beloved characters too. If you read it, you know of whom I'm talking about, so I won't need to retell you, but yes, a lot of semi to fully important characters that are relevant to some description or the other to the overall of Project Horizon are not going to make it alive, predictably. And the situation is getting more desperate and desperate. And then they managed to find a way to stop the brood from constantly, well, cloning itself. And now we only have a couple of tens of thousands left of them, so easy pickings, I guess. And that's really the vast majority of the chapter. Following these characters, up until it gets absolutely, utterly ridiculous, even for Project Horizon standards, and then suddenly a worldwide musical number starts off, promoted by Whisper, which is Fluttershy 2.0. After Stygius died, because yes, spoiler alert, Stygius dies. I honestly don't care that much, but I respect that many fans and people did. So yes, I feel your pain, so to speak. So Whisper starts to sing, and the singing is broadcast throughout the entire wasteland, and somehow, even though we're seeing this scene from Blackjack's point of view through the Perceptitron, somehow the magic of musical performance allows us to see what's going on at the very same time that Whisper is singing. It's like in a musical, you enter in a world that follows its own rules, and suddenly, through the power of music, the entire planet breaks into a somewhat of a performance here, which would have been very, very interesting, very good to look at if you could actually see it. As it turns out, experiencing this scene through a description, it's not really quite the same. And also, it's incredibly silly. I mean, I know they sing all the time in the show, but considering the tone this whole gigantic saga was going for, with all the grit and the violence and the gore, and yes, it gets really silly, but I kind of have to draw the line to musical performances. It's just too silly. And it's especially silly if you consider that becomes an actual plot point, because all this singing is preventing ponies and other not ponies to go refuge themselves into the core of the Euphyton, which will allow them not to fall for the obvious trap by the Legate. The Legate. Which they actually find a way to somewhat defeat and remove the device that allowed him to live forever and constantly regenerate. You know, the thing that I don't remember the name now, but it was stuck in his heart. The same thing, the talisman, that is, that Rampage has. So now, after that is removed, he turns into freaking Tetsuo at the end of Akira, which is also ridiculous. And it would have also been interesting to see more than to read, to be honest. But what can you do? And this is where the chapter actually leaves off. Blackjack did nothing for the entirety of the chapter. She was just prying through others' lives and others doing things to advance the plot. And now apparently all that's left to do is for Blackjack to actually finally get to the Earth, I mean the Equus, the planet, and battle the freaking reawakened Eater of the Soul, Lavos. It's going to be her versus Lavos. That's what it is. That's what the Soul Eater is. I've been saying that so many times. It's going to be freaking the final battle against Lavos. That's what it's going to be. And I have to admit I have mixed feelings about that, because on the one hand, this is so bafflingly ridiculous. But on the other hand, it's like Chrono Trigger. So you can see why I have mixed emotions about this. Okay, I know what you all want me to talk about. You want to hear my opinion about that scene, that underage sex scene, that so-called consensual intercourse between the bastard and Scotch Tape. Well, this might come as a shock to you, but I don't really have a problem with it. I know, right? I'm just as confused about it as you are, but hear me out. I don't have a problem with it because even though this scene was if you ask me, completely unnecessary, much like most of the things that Somber writes to pad out his chapters. Seriously, that would be half as long if he could, you know, omit some details, so to speak, that don't really enrich the narrative. And you could also argue that the consensual part of this thing that's going on is not really credible because, well, other than she's a minor and a teenager, she was also in a very complicated emotional state that could have been easily taken advantage of. And even though it is established that Bastard does not take advantage of her, he does not resist her either, now does he? But regardless of all that, I don't have an actual problem with this scene because, unlike some other equally or more disturbing scenes that Somber has written in previous chapters, this one is not treated as if it were some sort of quirky, funny comedy skit. I mean, what really pissed me off about the eye-jizzing incident in chapter 72 was not only the fact it was gross and disturbing, but also that Somber find it funny. I just did not share his point of view on that. Clearly, we had different senses of humor, but in this case, the scene is actually treated with a little bit more of respect. It's all about the context and the framing of the sequence. It is in character for Scotch Tape to resort to that intercourse after losing her dad, being in that emotional state, and being sort of young and impressionable. It makes sense that she would take the idea of an emotional reset button in the form of sex from Blackjack, because that's what Blackjack has been doing the whole time with Scotch Tape's daddy, even in the presence of Scotch Tape herself. So it doesn't really come as a surprise that Scotch Tape would use sex as an emotional reset button. She regretted it later on, which is also good. And it leads to a scene in which, well, Blackjack finally managed to muster the courage to speak with her and talk about the loss that they experienced. I still think that scene alone was not actually necessary to get to that good emotional tete-a-tete with Blackjack later on, but I won't say it was completely gratuitous. It was not. And I'm sort of relieved because of that. With that said, talking about horses having intercourse, it's the most awkward and embarrassing thing anyone could ever do, publicly or not. So with that said, I'm just going to take this scene, put it aside and forget it ever existed. For the sake of my own mind. Now, like I said, this should cover the entire chapter. More or less, I covered the most important parts. Now the only thing that's left is presumably, the final act of this long-winded, honestly, too much long-winded saga that apparently is finally coming to an end. And I cannot wait for that, because yes, this needs to end as quickly as possible. And it's going to end with a bang, which might very well be a literal planetarian-sized bang, for all we know, for all we can expect from Somber. So, there you go, my 2 bits about Chapters 75 A and B of Fallout Equestria Project Horizons. See you next chapter, you guys. Stay wastelandy. I can't believe I just said that.